And 3, 2, 1. Welcome to LibernetLIVE. Libernet is a project that aims to marry blockchain technology and books and literature in the endeavor to liberate human knowledge. And I am joined wonderfully tonight by George. Hello, George. How are you?
I'm very well.
Good, good, good. This is our second run, by the way. We're trying this again because we had an interruption last time. That's very fun. Like I said last time, I'm wearing this because the word of the day is slavery, because we are all slaves of oligarchical capitalism. And this is sort of where we meet in our thinking as anarchists of differing natures, but anarchists nonetheless. And it's an interesting place for us to sort of talk formally, well, as formally as this can be, in regards to cryptocurrency and blockchain technologies, right? And it's an interesting place to meet because we're seeing a different face of anarchism that not only is sort of very drastically different and very newly invented, but also very, very pervasive and growing quite quickly. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. It's like if like ignoring like the early 20th century, like anarchism was really important. But
yeah,
if you start from like the 90s and you look at like the Zapatistas in Chiapas, Mexico, I think people tend to look at it as, oh, that's just like an autonomy movement for like indigenous population. They don't really tend to look at it on a global scale, whereas that's what they wanted to get at. And this was just as like the internet was starting as well. So you had the internet running like a completely new horizontal platform to get their ideas across. And I from my point of view, I kind of see like cryptocurrency and things like that as another part of that.
Yeah.
So, not influenced by the state or any other international institutions, things like that. It provides you anonymity, autonomy. Yeah.
I sort of said oligarchical capitalism as a joke, but this is the sort of strange thing when capitalism becomes authoritative in a way that is so obvious, especially when you have state powers that are so intertwined with neoliberalism, which has just swept the entire world.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting to sort of hear you to begin with talk about, like, I don't know, crypto anarchists as they were self-proclaimed, like Edward Snowden and people of that nature. Who else was that? God, forget it. I WikiLeaks. I forget.
Julian Assange.
Hey, lovely. Jinx. But yeah, these are sorts of these are sorts of people that would of course advocate, because not only are they sort of advocating for against sort of like particular state powers, but also calling for like a sort of a decentralized way to deal with money outside of the US dollar, for example, but also with new internet technologies. So we certainly have an interesting world ahead of us, I suppose.
Yeah, it's kind of a capitalism is quite a weird one because it's very authoritarian, but it wants to get its tentacles like everywhere. So
yeah,
in a sense, it's very authoritarian. Like you look at China, and that's, I'd say, one of the best capitalist countries there are right now. Ignoring the US, which I think is quite like a special case. But capitalism also doesn't like really authoritarian states. They don't like the small dictators who are crazy and don't know what they're doing. It likes like a steady space to operate on. So if you look at the West, we have like democracy where we go and vote every 4 years, and it's quite like a nice linear plane where there's not going to be many changes because a lot of democratic actions just gets dissipated through our institutions and our especially by our police and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We had the whole Bill protest going on in, is it Bristol? Something, yeah. So like
I think in the UK, I think in Brighton as well. I think there's kill the bill. I think is
kill the bill.
I see like I see things on my Twitter feed, and a lot of the time I haven't got the emotional energy to learn more about them. I mean, I should sometimes, because like it's good to keep it's good to keep up with, like, general current affairs and political affairs, but sometimes I'm just so disheartened by how a lot of it ends up, like the George Floyd protests, etc. But you're this thing about I don't know, the sort of the apparatus of state power to to reinforce itself. It's quite scary seeing the movement and seeing the sort of the move to sort of authoritative movements, and how we're going to and sort of the appropriate response to that, I suppose, as a sort of as decentralization, and it existing in sort of and it being sort of organized through cyberspace.
Yeah, it's quite a weird one. Like, when you look at like state and capitalism now, they're very contradictory. So like capitalism, the traditional argument encourages competition among businesses, things like this, but it also encourages competition through states. And this is where you get like the authoritarian element, because the states have got to look after themselves, and you get like the rise of nationalism from this. Oh, we've got to protect our economy, or you say, no, these people are bad for economy. Like, look at the trade war between the US and China at the moment. That's probably like one of the most perfect examples of that kind of like contradiction going on. And it kind of dismisses the whole like, neoliberal argument that that people make, that the US is a neoliberal dream, there's free trade and everywhere, and actually they're like really protectionist, and like the best economies, example China, are really protectionist, and they use like these neoliberal ideas to kind of like exploit other nations and stuff. So there's a real strong like, nationalism to it.
Can you explain exactly what protectionism is? Because that's a term that I've I've come across a fair bit, but I sort of understand it roughly. But I think you could give me a better explanation, and give the audience a better explanation of what protectionism is.
Yes, yeah, so, protectionism is basically where like a state, or even like a business, they say that in order to protect our industries, for example, we're going to put tariffs and stuff on certain goods. We're going to perhaps ban the import of certain items, or even in Europe during like the 1800s, a lot of countries would ban certain types of tradespeople leaving the country, or even coming in the country to protect their certain industries. And that's what like protectionism is.
Yeah, like a sort of regulate, a form of regulate, like a form of regulation to a certain extent. I mean,
yeah, it's like the devil for neoliberalism. They say, oh, protectionism is like awful. That's not how economies work and stuff. That's not what you do if you want a strong economy. Whereas in reality, the way like the strong economies we have now formed, so again, China, US, the UK, most of Europe, is through this like hundreds of years of like protectionist policies, which allowed them to like, build up their economies.
Which is very ironic, considering the whole laissez-faire philosophy that Thatcher,
yes.
Thatcher, and who was the US equivalent? Reagan. That's right. I need to clear up more on my US history and the list of US presidents that followed. And I mean, the thing that makes blockchain so interesting is that I don't think you have to be against capitalism to appreciate blockchain. I think a lot of economic right-leaning libertarians understand the flaws of capitalism even in its current way, as opposed to maybe left-wing thinkers like you and I, who sort of kind of really want to advocate a sort of radical change in terms of, I don't know, what you might call the human spirit and freedom of the human spirit. Even then, if we're thinking about sort of like economies and how they sort of run, I don't know, to maximize, I don't know, productivity and value, if you want to call them that. Yeah. I still think I think blockchain's a very interesting world to get into. If at least if you're not sure about it, at least like research sort of ways in which blockchain and cryptocurrency works that is somewhat different to the sort of the irregulation and lack of transparency and things
you're probably like one of the best examples of that, like cross-party unification was in the US with the whole like GameStop thing, where you actually had like the Republicans and Democrats, or like some of them at least, like coming together and saying like, that this is crazy how these like hedge funds and banks or whatever have just like screwed over like ordinary people. And it's you kind of had like the same thing with the Occupy movement. I was reading Graeber's book, and he says that you had like communists, you had anarchists, you had like traditional liberals, all coming together in like these parks around the US and saying like this is crazy. We don't elect these bankers or these people who run these international corporations, but somehow they have such a large influence over our government that our government now bails them out instead of supporting like ordinary people.
Well, that's the thing. I think that was the Greek guy, like he was like an economic Yaris. Please tell me his name if you know his name to save me.
Oh, yeah,
Yaris Gana. Yeah, this is where I should really like have someone tell me, have someone look things up to me. But yeah, he was talking. He spoke in the beginning of one of his books about how, in terms of the economic recession, how both sides agreed with how poorly it was handled in countries like the US and the UK, because and mainly due to like sort of bailing the banks out, because both libertarians on the right and I don't know, social democrats on the left completely agreed that like why are you bailing the banks out? They should have failed, and this is
It's quite weird because there's in both parties in the US, like Democrats and Republicans, you've got like a lot of the main characters pretty much share the same ideals. Like you won't see them debating like the pursuit of like the free market and other like neoliberal projects, because they're all funded by the same people. They're not like Republican companies supporting Republicans. They're like Facebook, Amazon, all these people are pouring money into them both. So it's a sham, really.
Yeah. This is the great paradox. Once you create a market so free that it no longer becomes free. I mean, yeah, I mean, it is somewhat inevitable at some point when you have certain corporations sort of rise beyond sort of company status and start being governments of themselves. Like I find and I might be chatting rubbish here, but I find Google and these sorts of pervasive perceptual, it's sort of perceptual governance, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and it's not even just like the money they pour into like politics and like certain bills and stuff, but I feel like on dodgy ground here, but when you look at the banning of Donald Trump from Twitter, and it's like this is an organization with no democracy in it. It's a business, and they're deciding what the right discourse is and who's going to provide that discourse. I mean, like we can, as like left-leaning people, we can sit here and say, "Oh, I know it's Donald Trump. He's a nasty piece of work anyway."
But
I mean, that's at the moment they're focusing on Donald Trump. Tomorrow or the next year, or whatever, they might turn around and say, "Actually, you anarchists or whatever, you're the problem now. We're going to start banning you lot off." That's a precedent for what they can do.
This is an interesting point when you think about this. When you think about excuse me, this sort of argument that even libertarians will have again, supporting the ban of Donald Trump from Twitter, which sounds counterintuitive, but when they start saying, well, actually, Twitter are a company, they can do what they like. Now, we have to really consider how individual freedom in relation to society is, especially when we're put in a system where, and I'm not making any value judgments here, but when we're put in a system where we have a sort of social obligation to use Twitter and have Twitter be a primary news source, as opposed to sort of one of the bunch, like a newspaper. Twitter is a very unique social platform and not very you can't really swap Twitter out for another social platform at the moment.
Yeah.
So this is where I would call into question what element of freedom we really have. If it's a company and they provide a service, then great. But can I go to another Twitter-based forum that does what Twitter does and has those and has a similar competition with Twitter? I mean, in some ways you can, in some ways you can't, and I'm not sure where the line is. But I think we need to talk. I think we need to like at least be aware of the ambiguity of this line. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some like even Republican US president from like decades ago, you'd probably look at like the state of affairs of like Google, Amazon, Twitter, things like this, and say like this is like shocking that these giant corporations have such large control over their aspects of the market. But with things like social media, like Twitter and Facebook, and not only have you got like the issue with that these are private businesses who are deciding what's the right discourse, but also in the way they make their money by keeping you in those certain circles, just showing you what you want to see, or perhaps like things that might interest you. They're also kind of like reproducing like that really nasty politics that exists at the moment, where we're not talking about issues, we're talking about like political scoring.
Yes, and divisions and polarizations. And that, I mean, this is, I mean, again, this is the kind of the weird sort of philosophical problem that I sort of think we have, where we're sort of thinking about like, are we free to just decide not to engage, or are we inherently in a world, in a social world, where polarization becomes inevitable even for our psyches? And that's I haven't got the answer to that. I don't even know if that's the right question, but there is there is something there. I think there is something there's something to do with how the freedom we have in going into the world and discussing discussing politics and the public sphere. And when the public sphere to a certain extent becomes sort of censored and licensed by companies that have such power, whether we really have an alternative that we can move to, and I'm not sure if we quite do.
I think depending on all issues, everything is political. I mean, you can't really not have like a political viewpoint on something, because what your views are and what they're not are a reflection of the society you're brought up in. Like you can like think like questions such as like gender, race, and things like what you're interested in, what you're not. But I think the problem with like polarization at the moment is you've got these big businesses exploiting the divide, but it's also deeper. It's the very institutions themselves. Our political systems in the entirety of the West are built on that opposition. You've got to have the left opposite, you've got to have the right. Whereas I think to kind of get past that, you need like the consensus building. A lot of the I guess like the Zapatistas again in Chiapas, citizens' assemblies where you're not just two sides attacking each other, you're different individuals, groups, peoples talking with each other to come to solutions. You see examples of that in the Occupy movement. They had citizens' assemblies, and like famously the people's microphones. But also if you look in like Rojava in Syria, and that's how they do it. That's how they're governing themselves. It's people coming together and just talking about the issues that there are, not this point scoring, just being like nasty for the sake of it to get publicity and stuff, to get like the most amount of likes or whatever. It's real. It's what I put. It's real politics.
Yeah, I mean, like, authenticity of communication, and it becomes very dangerous when we lend our communication out to places that score our opinions and create sort of camps out of algorithms and echo chambers, and I'm not sure, but I feel like we're sort of reaching the peak where people are sort of realizing the ludicrousness of the game, but at the same time are sort of unable to get out of it because they have no alternative way to do it except actually, I don't know, go out into cafes and talk to people in cafes, but that doesn't happen. That's a very hard thing to organize. That's a very hard thing to organize, that perhaps this is a sort of potential.
But it's kind of like the Gramscian idea. This is a hegemonic, like this is a hegemonic ideology.
Yeah.
You know, we're born, we're brought up within the system. It's all we know, and in a sense, it's called like biopolitics. We produce this system because we just accept it as the given. Whereas to kind of get around that, we have to do. You know, we've got to practice what we want in the world. I think it's called like prefigurative politics or something. You know, you have what you want. You got to practice that. So, for example, I don't know, like us meeting in a cafe, talking about these issues. So, you know, like consensus building and stuff, inviting other people to talk about this. That's one way of kind of like breaking that hegemonic thought.
Hegemonic, yeah. I would press you to sort of like, I think hegemonic's been well defined, sort of in the context. I mean, I mean to sort of give like a sort of an exact definition to people that are listening. Like hegemonic sort of refers to like, you know, a sort of totality of like a belief to the point where it's invisible. I think would be a good sort of almost a good definition where it's, you know, maybe I'm trying to think of an example, like, you know, just an idea that is so widespread and so like drip fed by an institution or a state or that it is seen as inherently true and it's like an unknown known. We don't even know that we know it because it's like a fish in water to the people that are in that society. Is that would you say that's a good
Yeah.
sort of?
I think you almost quoted Marx then. You know, I think he says they don't know they're doing it, but or something like that, but they are, or something like that. But yeah, like hegemonic thought is kind of like, for an example, you know, in our politics in Parliament, you know, we have the Labour Party, the Liberals, the Conservatives, and they have their own views. I mean, they're very similar to each other, but their views are slightly different. But then you won't see any of them questioning parliamentary democracy or capitalism. You won't see any of them questioning like the state. I mean, or the values of Britain, and even the royal family. I think that's a very unique one for us. In the US, they don't have that, but here you don't have it is a sin to question the Queen. Even Jeremy Corbyn was very pressed into he wasn't even questioning the Queen. I think he was. I don't know. I need to like, but I think he was genuinely like, you know, he had a like, that was one of the ones is that he didn't like kneel. I don't know. He didn't like oh god, it was you know, something to do with the national anthem, and he didn't like pledge. He didn't like sing along with us or whatever because he thought it was because he thought it was I don't know. He thought he didn't think it was necessary to the actual progression of politics, and eventually he sort of got pushed into a sort of box where he sort of had to become very similar to a lot of the other politicians. Even though he was so radical in comparison, he was still pushed into this sort of category where, you know, he pledged loyalty to the Queen, and he obeyed the national anthem, and above, you know, and proclaimed the values of Great Britain, you know, and all the rest of it, which is just which is just so interesting when you sort of think about the whole purpose of politics is to question and to improve things. And there are just some things that you have to accept for no real reason other than the fact that that's just the way things are. Yeah, I think he kind of pushed himself into that box in one way as well, because he wouldn't take that strong stance and say like, no, these are my thoughts. So I'm not gonna like bend over for you because you don't agree. And that's kind of like the thing that we heard in the news recently, you know, like reports coming from like 2017 and things that like the Queen and the royal family have had this massive influence on our government's policies and stuff. Like there was the one recently that was on the news is saying that there was like a commission or something to return stolen artifacts to the countries, obviously where they've been stolen from during like the British Empire.
Yeah.
And so like all the ministries, I think all like these kind of places had like people go in, they said, oh, okay, you got this and this, you got to send it back, whatever. But the royal family managed to like wiggle their way out of it. But there was an exemption in the bill which said, everyone apart from like royal family properties can be inspected and stuff. and things like that will happen, but then people will still like kind of reproduce but it's the royal family, you know, don't want to get rid of them, they're good.
Yeah.
Like it's crazy. Whereas if it was anything else, people would probably be like, okay, yeah, that's pretty rubbish, you need to sort that out. But it just doesn't really happen.
The unknown knowns. I think I was quoting Zizek actually, as opposed to Marx. The sort of the thing that's just outside of your line of sight. Like, well, we can't question that because that's just there, man. That's just there, man. And this is the way it is. Which makes me very interested in blockchain, because blockchain is such a new invention, and it is so outside of any, like, you know, in a lot of ways, so outside any traditional sort of systems, that I think the reaction to it is obvious, that people are just like confused and very sort of anxious about it, such an unknown system of monetary distribution, that you know, there's a sort, you know, and there's a sort of like, well, we can't do that, you know, people can buy drugs with Bitcoin, people can do all sorts of awful things with Bitcoin. It's like, which is a strange argument when I think about it, because it's like, you can do that with real money anywhere. Like that's what money is. like you know, and the other thing, you know, like it's unregulated, it's not based on anything, you know. That's another argument I hear. It's like, well, how can you find any promise in Bitcoin? It's not based on anything. I'm like, hello. We've lost the gold standard.
But neither. Yeah.
Our money's not based on anything. It's fiat currency, you know. It's so, I mean, it's just so interesting. I mean, other argument. I mean, I'm sort of just interested in people arguing against it, because I find it so interesting, and another one of the arguments is that while I'm at it, is that mining is terrible for the environment, and people, you know, and which is a very strange thing to focus on when you're discussing an economy, because you don't actually need to print more money for it to be more valuable. The only value of a money is currency is compared to other currencies. So for one, there's only going to be 21 million Bitcoins in existence. But even if they banned mining tomorrow, it wouldn't make a difference, because the value of the money is dependent on what it can do, as opposed to how much there is of it. It's not like you're saying, oh, we have to stop printing dollars because it's bad for the environment. But, you know, even though dollars have to be printed, do you see what I mean? Like, because you don't accrue more value from Bitcoin from making more Bitcoins. It's the value of the Bitcoin itself that goes up in comparison to other currencies. I find it such a strange argument. Like that, you know, there is you know, it's not like if you printed $1 billion, then everyone's going to become more rich. Like, you know, you could reduce the amount of Bitcoins, and then the Bitcoins themselves will just go up in value. So I find the arguments against gas prices I find it a very strange reason to just sort of say, well, I'm not used to this currency, and I'm not used to the ramifications of how it can change things. So I'm going to find very strange sort of holes in it, and sort of create arbitrary arguments that I don't quite fit in with reality. But that's you know, I don't know what you think about this, but
I think I kind of look at it, and I'd agree with you at first, and say, like, that argument where it's like, oh, I know it's going to be used for crime, which it probably is. Like, yes. All money,
inevitably.
Yeah, it's like all money everywhere. But also, if you have like a cryptocurrency, you're not. I mean, well, for example, the currency we have now, you know, there's like the numbers on it. They know where it's come from. You know, they kind of know like where it's been and stuff, where it's been traded. And you don't kind of get that. You don't get that. I don't know. I'd call it like institutional spying. You know, where the banks know what you're doing and stuff. And does it affect? Does it like work with like your credit score and stuff, or is this is what I don't really understand.
Well, this. I mean, I'm still learning, because I'm relatively new to this whole thing. I'm not sure if it affects your credit score. Yeah, these are sorts of things. These are sorts of things to think about. And then there's also, like, you know, sort of taxation and sort of ways to regulate that. yeah.
But I was thinking that
Mm.
with the currency you have now, it's mediated through like the banks and the government, and so they can check your credit score and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But and obviously that affects what you can do as a person. Like, can you get a mortgage for a house? Can you get a loan for a car? Things you actually need to like survive in the world we live in. But I suppose if it's kind of like this anonymous thing where you're just trading on like the app or whatever it is, you don't have that. You can. It's kind of like building an alternative where credit scores aren't important, but you can just do what you want to do. You don't have that menacing figure of like the bank or the government telling you what you can do.
Well, I think both political sides would sort of like just pry and be like, excuse me, what's the purpose? What's the purpose of the credit score? What's the purpose? I mean, what's the purpose of having someone watch you all the time to ensure that you're spending money, I don't know, correctly? Is this hegemonic? I'm not sure. But I mean, we think about it on sort of more of a widespread sort of like, like the kind of the assurance that someone's watching my spending, so I'm safe in some way. And I think this is a sort of idea is something we should be kind of careful of when we're sort of thinking about like having some sort of like some figure checking in on us all the time to make sure that we do things correctly, and whatever that means.
And you kind of, in a way, you can also gaining your like autonomy to do things. That you're no longer a piece of data in a bank's computing service thing, where they collect information about you, so they can like jig your insurance around depending on like the things you do. You get that autonomy that you can just do what you want. You don't have to worry about is this going to affect my credit score, or is this going to affect my insurance or something like that, which I think is like really important, because that's the stuff that just ordinary people are terrified of.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like when yeah, the whole sort of loan system, in my opinion, is like, along with insurance and all the rest of it, is I think I think there's a lot of it's very hegemonic in a lot of ways, because if you were offered a new system, a new way of assuring your money was safe, and assuring that your money was ensuring you could loan money out in a sort of fair way, and you're presented with a system that seems to be better, and there's no matter what, because you're not used to it, you're going like, this isn't even, you don't even have to be behind cryptocurrency, but like it's like, no matter what is going to happen, if you're faced with a new system that you're not used to, you're not going to like it to begin with. You're going to be against it naturally, like in the same way that you'd be against anything radically new coming in, because you're not used to it. So this is we have to be very careful of what we're so quick to put down, and
you're probably going to expect a lot of resistance from like these hegemonic institutions, the state or big businesses or other international institutions. They're going to say like, oh, actually, this is like challenging. This is our aspect of life. We control. You can't challenge this. So you're probably going to see a lot more stuff on the news saying like, oh, cryptocurrencies caused this crime.
I'm fairly sure they're going to try that. I'm fairly sure that like one or two things are going to happen, or they'll both happen. And one of the things that will happen is banks will offer their new version of cryptocurrency, which is safe, secure, blah blah blah. It's going to be like a lovely packaged kind of like, oh, you like cryptocurrency? We'll do it our way. We'll keep your investments safe, and we'll keep them safely and watched over and secure and all the rest of it. And I think either people are going to buy that and then do it and still play into how they operate. And if that doesn't work, they're going to try and criminalize it. This is a very rough prediction I have, but I think it's going to be like we'll try our way, and then when it doesn't work for them, they'll say, okay, let's gather together to criminalize it. And this is what we mean when we talk about the sort of the market becoming so free, it no longer becomes free, because these banks become less and this is what I mean about freedom. These banks become less sort of like, oh, I'm in the world, I'm situated in the world, I want to put my money in a bank. It is more that like I essentially have to put my money in a bank to participate in the society. Like my existence is dependent on me using these banks. And if I use any other banks, then if I use a crypto wallet or whatever, then I'm essentially I don't know, someone that shouldn't be trusted, and someone that needs to be sort of looked at with concerned eyes, if I may say.
Yeah, it's also like that's the decent thing for like solidarity as well. I mean, like it was something which a lot of organizations, as like specifically in like Rojava, struggle with is getting money, because money is a very institutionalized thing. It's monitored. People know where the money's going. They know where it's coming from. And in a way, it kind of provides an opportunity where anyone anonymously can send money in supporting things to support other organizations. They can't be tracked. They're not in danger of being prosecuted or imprisoned or something like that.
And we'll just see what happens with with its future. Yeah, I'm just so interested to see like what happens, I suppose, like with these new technologies. and that's really all that they are. They're technologies. And they're not really like blockchain isn't a company, I suppose. If you may, like I mean, again, this is I mean, there was that whole thing in like 2012 or something. There was that organization that wanted to sort of censor and control the internet. I think I forgot the name of the company. Do you remember? Do you remember this happened? There was like,
yeah, I've heard. No.
No, you've heard. So there was like there was an American company in 2012, and I really I wish I had someone like a Jamie from Joe Rogan to pull that shit up, as Joe Rogan would say. That'd be a nice addition. One day we'll get there. But it was this company that they wanted to they wanted to sort of really regulate the internet and like sort of ensure that it was like safe to go. And I think and obviously there was so much pushback that it didn't happen. And now I think they're doing it in a more insidious way, like through sort of rising companies sort of dominating aspects of the internet.
Yeah.
Facebook and Amazon and Twitter and Google and all the rest of it, and then these companies become so intertwined with the state itself that it's really hard to it's really hard to like differentiate, and that's a very clever, insidious way to
the internet's quite a weird one, because you have that aspect of it where it's incredibly liberating and horizontal, but then you got to remember like the search engines, the social media, these incredibly hierarchical like businesses. You want to make money, so you kind of got to like weave your way through it. But then you just got to remember like the internet, this like the cryptocurrency, they're tools. They're not solutions which are going to solve the problems we experience now. But like depending on how we use them, who's using them, it like I said, they're a tool which can help us build something like an alternative to the hegemonic thought we have now. Like a completely different way of doing things.
Yeah. It's such a I find it really interesting with I don't know, with the internet. Like me and my flatmate are recently sort of looking at like websites that you can go on the internet, which there's so much crazy stuff you can do on the like there's so much stuff you can do on the internet. There's so like there are websites, there's like so many amazing creative things you can do on the internet, and we don't use any of them. We use 5 websites or 5 to 10, and they're all social media, and they're all ranked by status and and there are websites where you can see Wikipedia articles being edited in real time. There are websites where you can see this the scale of size of objects relative to each other, from the atom to the universe. I wish I had more. There are so many incredible things you can do with the internet with organizations that have done this for free. I find it interesting that I don't use any of them. I don't know why I don't use any of them, because when I do them, I find them very intriguing. But I think there might be I think one of the reasons might be is that they're not sold to me, and they're not advertised to me.
Yeah.
And so
an example I think of is that Like being at uni, like the massive problem, especially at the moment, because the coronavirus and stuff, is getting the books and like materials and stuff. So you can do the work, you can reference and stuff, and you can like actually learn. And my uni has like an online library where you can access some stuff. It's all very dependent. But there's this the organisation called I don't know if you remember from uni, but Library Genesis.
Okay.
And it's what it is. It's just like pirated books and like journal articles and stuff, which you can just download like all for like completely free and stuff. But like there's other stuff like there's I'm sure I've told you about like the Anarchist library, where people are just sharing their work completely like free of charge, and it's great. I think some of the best stuff is the free stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, this brings us back to the whole point of what LibernetLIVE's about, and that's what makes this project that I'm I don't know, like hosting a podcast for so interesting, because we want to create a sort of digital library of Alexandria, where not only is there a sort of I don't know, legitimate source of for people to create books and for people to sort of, I don't know, borrow them, right, via like NFT, like basically like it's like a digital library card, really, where you're sort of you're paying a certain amount of cryptocurrency, but you can take it back, and then you can take it back, and you can take it back. And this is the sort of project we want to have. But there's also going to be like a great connection between the consumer and the creator, because with the blockchain technology, that author can see everyone that's this is the sort of rough framework that we've got. The author can see everyone who's reading their book, and then you can ask, and then you can create discussion, and then you can build the wealth of both documented and communicative knowledge. And that's our thing. I mean, what I find so interesting about Audible is that it's I was talking to a friend about this earlier. It's sort of convinced everyone that Audible is the best place to listen to audiobooks. And I can look at most of these. I can find most of these books online easily. I find it so. I don't know. Like it's just this. It's just like most books I've wanted to listen to. I'm able to like just simply find on audiobook somewhere on YouTube. I think that's. And that's what and people are sort of this is what I said to my friend in the adverts. It says, and again, this isn't a direct, this isn't this isn't an exact claim, this is just something that I've sort of noticed. It says download, get a free book with your 30-day trial. So it's a trial, which means that I'm basically getting 30 days of the paid experience, and I get one audiobook for free, which means which implies that even on the trial, I have to pay for more than one book. And do I don't know, I don't use Audible, but do I choose the book? Do I have a say? And I was just like, what? And yeah.
It will end up being like some footballer's autobiography or something.
or some footballer's wife, maybe. Oh man. Yeah, like that guy from The Ordinary Boys, and that Never Mind the Buzzcocks.
Yeah.
So being interviewed by the Daily Mail made me feel really posh in that market. Oh man, that is a quote that remain with me forever. My God, yeah. I mean, yeah, and we're seeing. We're just seeing a general pushback against sort of new ways of doing things, because I think it's just
there's a lot of stuff now where it's and like groups organized taking like the power away from like these giant corporations and stuff who are doing it for like these massive profit machines basically. And it's just like people saying, oh, do you know what, this would be a really cool service to like sort out. Let's just get some mates and like build this website or whatever. And that, again, it's coming back to the idea of like the prefigurative politics. We want a society in which we're not competing against each other for like profit or whatever, and we're actually just working together. Like this is one way to do it.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good term, prefigurative politics. Actually, that's like something based on like I mean, actual communication, you know, like communication,
Yeah.
as authentic as it can be online. That's the that's the key. I find. I mean, well, I find it so weird being on like Facebook and Twitter and sort of seeing. I mean, I had a coffee with a friend a few months ago, and he basically said that Facebook's not a place for communication. Facebook's a place for flag posting your beliefs, whatever they are at the time, and not
Yeah.
accepting any any criticism at all. If you if with how things are at the moment, with communication at the moment on Facebook, for example, if I have a debate with someone over comments and it has like it's like a 30 comment thread, it looks ugly. It doesn't look good. People
Yeah.
like say, "Hey guys, shut up, stop arguing," which is so strange, I think, because it's like that's what the digital place is for. It's there for communication, isn't it? Is it not? I mean, like if you're on a social media account, it's yeah, that's the primary goal of it, and that's not it's not attractive looking. I don't know, and for some reason that's been put into my head that like you know, nuanced conversation over Facebook where you don't either completely agree or ostracize each other and say each other are disgusting people or whatever. They
Yeah.
one or the other, and any nuanced conversation in the middle is not 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 encouraged. Whereas
Yeah, no, if you're not just like arguing different views, you'll be reduced down to, oh, you spelt that wrong. I see that.
yeah,
I see that a lot on like YouTube videos. Like I watch a lot of like political videos on YouTube. Like the comment sections would be like something really like offensive or something, and then the comments will be arguing. And then it will come down to, well, you spelled that wrong. You're an idiot, and stuff like that is just trivial and like, demeaning for genuine like conversation.
And I wonder to what extent that's because of the people that are on the websites or to how the websites are structured. And I wonder whether it's the latter, because I don't know why people would talk to like this to each other. I don't like when I'm on a digital decentralized autonomous organization like Pizza DAO or the one that we're trying to set up, or Cypher, which is one the easiest trying to set up, or the one we'll try and set up with the actual Libernet project. Fingers crossed. We'll see what happens. We do not talk like this to each other. This is not how we talk. And I wonder what the difference is. Is it because we have a goal in mind? Is it because it's community? We have a sort of communitarian idea in mind, and we have, but like, or is it something else? I mean, I disagreed with someone on Twitter today over some sort of, I don't know, some sort of very particular viewpoint that I said was a bit too generalized and making, you know, jumping to conclusions too quickly. And that, I mean, that probably looked very unattractive for the purpose, because I'm sure they wanted to make a post and have every single person agree with them. And the fact that I disagreed made me, I don't know, not a valued, not a desirable person to talk to, which wasn't what I wanted at all. I wanted to thaw out the kind of the actual reason behind the tweet. That's actually not that's not a very attractive thing on Twitter.
Yeah.
And which is strange, because I actually want to reduce animosity between people, but this sort of, despite everyone agreeing with each other on Twitter, animosity is just growing further and further. Like people on Twitter, they're so angry, with each other, but they're not, but they're angry at sort of unidentifiable scapegoats and unidentifiable people on the, you know, some sort of an imagined enemy, and it's always like an imagined enemy, and there's this, so much.
Like the internet is just like, and social media, this is like great space where you can like talk to like anyone across any distance and like things like that. But you're not talking to a person, you're talking to maybe a little profile picture in a corner of a comment, and I think that's why things get like quite nasty, because you wouldn't say those kind of things in a face-to-face conversation. But also like, social media kind of promotes this like spectacle politics. You know, where someone like Donald Trump might say something like, in like a few words, he might say something like really racist, something. He says, I don't know, what does he say? Like, I mean, he tweets stuff like Mexicans are like criminals and stuff. And it'll be like a really short line like that. But then that's the spectacle. It's like, this is shocking, or yes, you got to rally around it. This is what I believe, and I think that's what, especially with how like the monetization works for like social media, it just promotes that kind of spectacle where it devalues real politics of talking to each other, coming to some sort of like consensus.
There's a sort of political ideology satirist YouTuber called JReg, and he sort of takes this sort of idea to its conceptual limit. So he'll have videos of like, you know, he'll be pretending to be like, I don't know, he'll have a character as a sort of, I don't know, a neo-Nazi with that has they them pronouns and stuff like this, and other things such as that's not to discredit anyone that, like, you know, but there will be all of these sorts of, you know, he will really exaggerate these sorts of polarizations between people, to the point of absolute absurdity. And I don't think he's not doing anything like, he's not meaning anything. He doesn't mean anything bad or malevolent. He merely wants to just sort of expose the idea that political ideologies aren't, because the other way he sort of looks at it is that you either, when you go into politics, you either pick an ideology and you stick to it, and then you maybe move to another ideology, or you enter politics just because you like the idea of being political and engaging in political affairs, and then over time you develop your own beliefs in accordance to what you actually experience in the physical world. Now, and I don't think either idea is better than the other, but we should definitely think about sort of, you know, not relying too much on just conceptual ideas on what politics is from a computer screen, and find, you know, have some certain way of I don't know, engaging in the world, engaging with other people, and seeing this, and seeing how it actually feels in that sort of way, and engage, finding a way to sort of find something authentic in relation to authentic in relation to what you find in the what you sort of find in the world, that doesn't blindly succumb to any particular ideology you might face yourself with, you might sort of be seduced into through echo chambers and certain forums that will convince you of one ideology being the best, etc., etc.
Yeah, I find like the concept of saying I am this ideology, you know, like a lot of uni students probably go to uni and say, oh, I'm a communist, not really like understanding that, and it doesn't make like sense. How can you possibly, as someone born and raised in a particular society, you know, with under certain conditions and stuff, how can you possibly agree 100% with that ideology, you know? And it's I think it's kind of why I'm an anarchist, because anarchism says, well, and autonomy really is kind of like, you can believe whatever you want, you can kind of like practice whatever you want, but it's your choice. Like you're not being told to do it by, I don't know, some like vanguard party or whatever. It's taking, like, you're taking the power back to do what you want to do in life.
Yeah.
And I think Emma Goldman said, you know, like, politics for the anarchists isn't about, you know, political parties or these particular institutions like Parliament or whatever. You know, it's working outside of this, you know, creating something for yourself. And I find it really frustrating when sort of liberals will say, and like they'll say, oh, cool for the trip ban on Trump and stuff like that, not really understanding like the repercussions. You know, as long as you have these like companies like Facebook and stuff, like censoring like certain opposition and stuff, you're just reproducing like the Nazi politics we have now. It's really frustrating.
Well, ideology doesn't have to necessarily mean, like, you know, communist, capitalist, or whatever, but just there's just sort of like getting yourself into camps and and sort of professing yourself, sort of giving yourself to sort of one idea, one sort of one very specific set of ideas,
Yeah.
and to sort of say this is who I am. This is this is what I identify. This is what I identify as, and not really sort of being able to communicate with other people. This is and that's it. That's it.
But I think it was like Zizeki says, like ideologies construct reality, because it's their ideologies is kind of like how we experience the world, how we understand it, and from our understanding we will change certain things. So in my dissertation, I'm saying that like you get these powerful figures in the state, whatever, businesses, wherever, and they'll have a particular worldview.
Yeah.
And their ideology, how they experience the world and understand it, then means that they're going to construct things which will benefit them, because that's how they understand it. Whereas what I try and promote is that, look, if we take down, if we operate outside of these institutions, we can construct a reality for ourselves, which is like beneficial for everyone. Like I talk about like people's assemblies in Rojava in Mexico and stuff like that. It's constructing a reality for ourselves where we don't have to operate within these minute frames.
Oh yeah, I mean, I went to Christiana in Copenhagen, and in a weird way, I felt like I was coming out of the cave, like Plato's cave, in this sort of weird way, because it was sort of a whole world. It was like that sort of anarchistic settlement where I would just sort of I was like, damn, this is like this is a whole new world to me, and I don't have this kind of limitation over how to conceptualize it. It was just this whole other place where I was, where the police didn't have much power, and systems were being organized as they saw fit, and it was this really weird sort of stepping out of the door and stepping, going out into some sort of other world, and it was a strange experience. I'd love to have more of those experiences. I'd love to sort of experience Chaz in Seattle. I would love to experience that, because I don't honestly believe a thing that either side of the media will say about it unless I see it myself. And this is kind of what I mean by authentic sort of being faced with the real world and seeing what you actually believe, as opposed to reading a sort of set of principles or social media links on a page, and they're sort of stepping out into sort of real complex engagement, like these real complex kind of actual engagements in the world, where I'm sort of forced to experience something that I haven't prepared for, and I just have to experience it full on, and learn from in a kind of radical way.
The experiences are key, really, because like I think a lot of people, when you're proposing alternative to, I don't know, capitalism or parliamentary democracy, they say, okay, what's your alternative then? How are you going to do it? I want to know like an exact point by point how it's going to work and stuff. And that's not the point. It's like you're trying to create an alternative. It's an experiment. Like you go to like these places, so it's like the ones you listed, or Occupy, Java, the Zapatistas and stuff, and they'll say, look, not everything we create here is perfect or even works sometimes, but that's the process. You're experimenting with new things. You're learning.
Well, it's natural creativity. I'm sorry to interrupt. I mean, in my book, and I naturally talk about the importance of difference and variation, even if the variations aren't as good, because when we have a sort of monastication, bloody, I'm creating words out of thin air. It's something you do when you sort of, I don't know, when you philosophize, and especially when you philosophize about language, you just sort of, I don't know, you create like words that mean, like they come out that have no meaning. Well, not really, but when you sort of make, you flatten out experience in the world, and as I'm sort of seeing, everyone sort of ends up having the sort of exact. I mean, with the problem with like social media, especially how it's run now, is that people sort of I feel like we're all sort of verging on the same sort of experience. Like, you know, before experiences were vastly different and incalculably and inquantifiably different. And now we're all just kind of verging into one point. And when I sort of talk about, when we talk about decentralization, both of blockchain and of actual political systems in sort of the physical world, I really think we should encourage decentralization to the point where we have a variation, a multiplicity of many different systems, each trying new experiments.
Yeah.
Because some won't, even if some don't work, because even then you are creating unique problems and you are varying and spicing up human experience.
Yeah.
What do I say? I'll try and quote myself at the risk of sounding really pretentious. It is not the what is it? It is not the removing of our problems that leads to virtue. It is the uniqueness of our problems that leads to virtue. If we all had this, if we all had the same problem, there would almost be no meaning in it, because there's no individual quest to find, you know, just sort of, or like, you know, sort of small communities quest to sort of find some sort of value in what they experienced solving the problem, how they experienced solving the problem. If you know, if we're all and so when we talk about like pragmatic, like anarchistic sort of places, at least what it's doing is creating individual sort of unique and novel experiences for people, at the very least, above you know, before the idea of perhaps challenging perhaps, you know, sort of institutional hegemonic sort of you know, sort of social states of affairs to say, oh well, this is the way it is done, this is the way it has to be done.
Yeah, I think this is a problem, like specifically with like Western societies, that I think we've got used to now just people doing stuff for us. You know, our politics is liberated to, you know, the politicians in Parliament or Congress or whatever. You know, our economy is now been limited to control by, you know, those few bankers or like financial advisors and things like that. Our community, our local communities are now run by some council that you elect every so often, and supposedly they know all about your local community and how to run it. It's crazy. I think you kind of need to like reclaim those spaces, and it's important that you talk about like centralization and stuff. You know, the solutions have got to come from the local. If they don't come from the local, then you're not fixing the problem. You're just replacing it with something else.
I have a recurring theme today where I have something interesting to say, and then the moment you stop talking, I completely forget what I was going to say. Lovely theme today. I think it's something today. I don't know. It's just I think everyone feels tired today. I don't know why. It's one of those days.
It's a Sunday. That's why my eyes are stinging. I'm tired.
The clocks have gone forward as well, which means my brain isn't quite adjusted. I'm not quite, you know, it's not quite used to what's going on. And
it really threw me off last night. I was like, I was sat here and I was looking at the time. It was like 1 or something, and like half an hour later, it said it was like 2:30. Like, what?
What happened? What happened?
Where's he gone?
Have I been asleep for an hour? Did I get abducted? Yeah. And now I've forgotten what you said, but this is the very interesting thing about I think that's what I was saying. I think this kind of delegation of authority to councils and sort of corporations and governments is a weird form of like I think it's a weird form of like paternalism, and we're sort of not grown up yet. We haven't really emancipated ourselves. We're not ready to leave home yet, because daddy's taking care of it for us, or mummy's taking care of it for us. When we have the ability to sort of control ourselves, for example, I go back to blockchain, you know, again, but like when we go back to, you know, when we sort of think about the ability to sort of control where the money goes completely on our own, and not have a bank sort of store it nice and safe for you, I think a very a common reaction to that is, oh, I can't do that. I can't do that for myself. Like the thing, I think a real thing that sort of gets people is, but I can't do that, you know. And then the immediate response is like, well, people can't be trusted. People can't be trusted to do that, you know. And with anarchistic, you know, sort of civilizations, it's like, you know, well, you know, it doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter if there's like a democracy and people are getting what they want. There's not an authority telling them what to do. So even if the authority isn't against their interests, people will feel, I think, are sort of compelled because of this sort of wanting to stay in the parents' dwelling. They want, they even if it's abusive, they aren't ready to move out, and they aren't ready to actually face decisions themselves and make decisions themselves, and not decisions of like what flavor of ice cream you're going to get at the ice cream store or what curry you're going to get at the Nepalese curry restaurant, but how am I going to actually organize myself with other people and generate my own unique problems with no one to guide me and no one to force things on me. That, I think, is actually scarier to a lot of people than authoritarianism, or whatever it means, either be it state authoritarianism or whatever, you know, that can be any sort of term that you would sort of use.
Yeah, there's definitely something to that. Like the state of the international corporations, things like that. These are patriarchal institutions, you know, and it kind of stems from that, like, the Hobbesian idea that, like, oh, without these central authoritative figures, you know, the world's going to be chaos. We're all going to be beating each other up and stealing like from each other, and it's rubbish, really. Like in Rajava, it's like it's a feminist movement, really. You know, like they're in Syria, like they're in Syria, like they're Kurdish, like very patriarchal societies, and they said, oh, no, screw this, this is rubbish. You know, women are going to be at the forefront of this revolution. You know, they set up like women's councils, and I think like every like assembly will have like a male representative and then a female representative and things like that. And my lecturer would say, like, instead of just like talking about things like this, you know, you got to do it. You got to go out and practice what you preach in reality. So like what you're doing, and then, you know, what other people are doing, like, they're like providing these, you know, kind of like horizontal, you know, built by the community services, is really important, because it's challenging that patriarchal, that authoritative figure. He's saying, like, look, we don't need you. We can do this ourselves.
Yeah, and be sort of and willingly step foot into ambiguity. that's a very scary thing. I mean, I find this sort of, this is where I don't know, I'm reminded of Jordan Peterson's kind of idea of chaos, that is like, you don't want to go into the dragon of chaos, man. And it's like, I find it so interesting. I don't think he believes his idea of order himself fully, because at risk of sounding misinformed, I might be, but like when you sort of identify the universe as inherently a chaotic place in which there is ambiguity everywhere and radical freedom to make your own choices, how Jordan Peterson would lovingly sort of step into kind of what Sartre would call bad faith and say, well, let's just do it this way because it's safe, and this is the way it's been done, and this is what, and then obviously he would appeal to some sort of Jungian sense and be like, well, you know, this is, you know, if we look at the archetypes, you know, and sort of some very sort of, I don't know, very abstract sort of sense of, oh, the archetypes, well, this is the way humans have naturally organized themselves, so this is the way it must always be done, even though these archetypes are normally very repurposed to what Jordan Peterson finds convenient.
Yeah, with a lot of it as well, they're just projecting their own views of like society and what it is now onto like past generations and stuff. You know, like Marx was quite infamous for doing this. You know, he said, this is how history works. It's a natural progression. You know, you go through feudalism and into capitalism, and then you get to communism and stuff. You know, it's rubbish. And but also, like, another thing, I think we can kind of take like the like the neoliberal arguments, you know, they say like we don't need government intervention, we don't need intervention, we can do it ourselves, you know, we're gonna do this ourselves. And I'm like, yeah, I agree. Yeah, exactly. That's why, you know, we shouldn't bail out the banks. That's why we should like organize from local communities and stuff, and not ever give in to like, these giant police forces which are like armies, or states or councils who make terrible decisions on our behalf and stuff.
Let me just think to respond to that. We are at constant risk of false emancipation before we jump back into some other authority to tell us what to do. And this is not even this. I mean, I know you say that like everything is political, but I think this goes beyond political. When you sort of we want something to cling on to. So if we were to say, okay, well, even if you were to say, I'm going to cling on to freedom, you then define and systematize freedom, and then say, I'll cling on to this, and then the sort of the version of freedom that you have becomes an authority to tell you what to do. We don't want no answer, even though there is no answer. We want some kind of oh, your lights are going crazy, George. We want some kind of assurance, I think, that as long as we, you know, as long as we have something that we can cling on to, whether, you know, and with neoliberalism, it's a brilliant example, because laissez faire, let the market do it, and yet still then we find ourselves clinging on to sort of, you know, market beliefs. I'm trying to think of another example. I'm trying to think of another, you know, like but there are a few examples.
I think that like clinging on to certain beliefs or ideas that could just be like a symptom of the world we live in, where we're reduced to being under like a mobile labour force. We're reduced to being a certain nationality, because it's what like the state reproduces, and you kind of like you lose touch of other identities which might be important to you. You know, you can
I've got one. Well, I've got one like about the you know, sort of the, you know, let's leave the European Union. I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Let's leave the European Union, and let's pledge freedom to our country as Britons, you know, and we still cling on to that. I mean, you know, I just sort of think about the anarchistic sort of movements and think about you know, there is no clinging there. People are working it out literally to each other. They don't know, and this is the thing. When do we? How long can we be safe for? You know, how long can we sort of say? How long can we say? Well, let's do it the way it's been done, before we actually start stepping out and trying to gauge some actual, you know, some actual kind of, oh, I'm in the desert of the real. I'm here talking to this person, and there is no conceptual judgment on how I should talk to this person, how much he deserves to be paid, whose authority there is, you know. And that I think that answer is just too. I think that sort of situation is just too stressful for some people. So
I think it's a bit of a dilemma for a lot of movements. Really, it's that first step of people sorry, I've just had the messages pop up. It's that first step of trying something new, like trying to like convert someone to a different way of doing, because it's hard to imagine a different world. And
I mean the thing. This is the thing. Like, I mean, this is another thing about anarchism, where we're sort of, there's a sort of I don't know, linear anarchy that sort of gets set, you know, that sort of gets demonstrated. But not really. But I think people. This is what you're sort of saying when people say, well, how is this going to look? Bum 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 bum. And one of, you know, I did a podcast on my other channel a few months ago about something I like to call real anarchism, which is just like, you know, kind of, which isn't like, you know, this is what real anarchism is, more sort of like non-conceptual anarchism. And I think that form of anarchism is an anarchism that hasn't been decided by one person or idea, but is opening of negotiation between people.
Yeah.
And the idea that we don't know because we haven't talked about it yet, and we haven't decided as a community yet, which isn't a legislative or properly like it's not a manifesto. It's if anything it's almost the opposite of a manifesto, because you're trying to undo you're trying to undo the sort of the conditions that have led to your sort of unfreedom, where you think your biggest choice to make in the world is whether you're going to have a tall grande or venti cappuccino.
And there's also like a lot of real reasons why people are scared to like create things like people's assemblies and stuff, because they say like, that sounds great, but I've got a job, I've got to work so many hours a day to survive. How am I possibly going to do this? And for some people that might be quite attractive, just to vote someone in like every 4 years or whatever. So it's a two-way street. You've got to be really careful. Like, you've got to respect that people need to live.
People do need to live. Again, I do sort of find like kind of again the sort of the handing over of your authority to some government official. I find it a bit, there is a certain element of like, is that actual political action in the way that you think it is? It like sort of voting. I mean, of course, voting is important. I vote, but I don't think you can call yourself like a political. You engage in politics if you just do that. If you want to be, if you want an actual like deeper, authentic kind of engagement with politics and changing the world, I think the big thing to sort of remember, and I might be at risk of sounding like a broken record here at this point, who knows, but there is no one holding your hand. No one's telling you what to do. And that ambiguity is very. I mean, even for me right now, when I'm sort of creating these podcasts, this is a position. I'm sort of crafting my style as I sort of go, and and I want to and to sort of be a bit meta here. I want to have a good production value. I also want to. I also want humor, and I want I want some kind of sort of Gonzo-esque kind of surrealism when it comes to. I want to sort of make people sort of be sort of question themselves both in what I'm saying and how I'm saying it. This is something that I'm trying to employ more. This is and this is probably why this podcast comes off as a little different to the podcast I've done previously, because I'm experimenting. I'm experimenting with style. I'm experimenting with the ways of conversing and ways I'm feeling at the time. And there's that whole uncertainty. I have no idea whether this is going to pay off or not. That's more important than doing things safely if I want to actually make everlasting difference in the world. That's the same thing for Libernet. When we are when we're embarking on a project to make a digital library of Alexandria, the reason, let me try and get this straight. Let me try this correct. The reason it's making the endeavor is going to make everlasting change in the world is because nothing like this has been done before. So as a result, we have no idea. We haven't got a manual on how to do it. We have to just embrace the uncertainty and do it anyway, and have no idea what the future really holds. And this is the sort of the, that mission statement, which is in some ways is no mission statement. It's we are trying to change that notion.
It also kind of like exposes like the myth around capitalism. They say like free of the market, free of the people, but in reality, like the constraint of having to produce value like for the market in order to survive, it constrains you from like taking these risks, experimenting with different ways, because you got to live, you got to earn money.
Yeah, absolutely, and
I completely forgot what I was going to say. Yeah, sorry. Like an example, they say like capitalism, it's brought about all these massive technological improvements and stuff. So we need to pursue it. But in reality, I know like in the US, like innovation is like compared to other like time periods has really dropped because you now have like these like copyright laws and things like this which really inhibit the process of designing something, improving upon it. And now all it is just the quick money, on like finances, using the stock exchange, things like that, instead of like long-term, experimentation with like different ways of doing things, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's again it's multiplicity and pluralism of systems is so important, and I hope I hope projects like things that blockchain will encourage, like NFTs and DAOs will, sort of speaking from a more radical sense of self, which is funny because I'm talking to an anarchist, which is clearly why this part of me is coming out, and why it's also like off the heezy, because we're disorganized. But I'm curious to see whether this idea sort of blossoms into a kind of sort of breaking away for people to start questioning the way they do things at a really fundamental level.
Yeah.
Or whether it's going to be enveloped into the system and people are going to end up simply saying, oh, okay, well, NFTs are, like DAOs are a great way to make traditional corporate structures such as, I don't know, like organizing water bills, like privatizing water, which is still based on the idea that like water is private. Or like all the rest of it. And it's private in Britain. You have to pay people in water and you're out water, and that's like that. I mean, and that's the thing. When does the DAO, the decentralized autonomous organization, will the DAO just help utilize the sort of efficiency of regulating those bills to people, or will the DAO completely revolutionize how we consume water?
Yeah,
that's the deeper level that I'm kind of really excited about, I suppose. And I'll be obviously like people will disagree, and that's fine. But that again encourages the multiplicity of systems. Maybe in some places we can privatize water. In some places we can publicize it and nationalize it and make it free. And I also say in that part about multiplicity of systems is that we cannot arrive at a perfect moral system, even if such a thing existed, which I'm not sure it does. We cannot arrive at a perfect moral system with language, because many goods are precisely the opposite of what can be expressed lingually. So if we're going to have a sort of socio-cultural conceptual kind of way of saying, oh, build up, okay, here's good morality, we're still missing out all of the stuff that we can't talk about. And maybe that stuff we can't talk about is some sort of authentic experience, that kind of void, that like your situatedness in the world, where no one is telling you how to act, and no you haven't got a conceptual framework to act because you're in a new situation. And that's the scare, I think, for a lot of people. And I'm probably at risk of repeating myself, but like it's a real issue if we're going to say that moral systems are something that we can work towards globally, and eventually everyone will unanimously agree on, and then that'll be it. Oh, sorry, that'll be it. There will be there'll be no more progress moving forward. That'll be the end, and then everyone can just that everyone's fine, and then
that'll be the end of history.
The end of history, as Hegel would sort of want to say, which I think is probably the scariest idea I can think of.
I'd say at the end of the day, we can we can kind of summarize everything by just saying, like, go out and practice, go out and do something. You know, whether it's be something tiny in your local community or sort of part of like a larger movement, just go out and do it. Don't just like sit in and talk about it. You know, write essays about it. That's probably what I do right now at uni. You know, go and practice it, experience it.
I would almost go as far as to say, don't even expect results. Just do it because you can.
Yeah.
Because you need to exercise that autonomous will. And yeah, this is a part of my fascination with these new NFT and DAOs and blockchain movements, because I want to say, I want to see a sort of I want to see our ability to be autonomous, both in the digital world and the real world, exercise far more freely, and for the, and again with no idea of how it's going to happen, how it's going to go, and you know, like in the real world, for example, if I were to go to Weatherspoons, which is like the McDonald's of pubs in the UK, and say, you know, buy a drink and then say no to paying it, that was something that I was thinking about, perhaps, like, you know, what if you just bought goods and then just refused to pay for them? You know, I'm not saying go do that. I'm just saying, like, what if you did? You know, how would it feel? You know, maybe even above, like, you know, what social change you're gonna do, but how would it feel to you to do that? And where would you, what would happen once you stepped outside of the traditional custom, and you then and what sort of world would you step into once that bartender says, "Excuse me, what do you mean?" Like, you know, that is the sort of I think that's a kind of a metaphor for what we are always doing in making new decisions in the world, but not really being aware that what we're doing. We you know, we are always stepping into this kind of place where
the only way we can expect change is if we start like practicing an alternative. If we just like sit here and sulk and just complain about it, we're not changing the discourse. We're not altering how something can be done. Yeah,
I think it. I mean, I'm interested to see what's moving forward. So, I mean, we've been on for about an hour, George. I think should we finish this?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Oh, it's about over an hour. It flies by. It absolutely flies by.
Yeah, it's gone very quickly.
It's gone very quickly. Good. Yeah. Well, thank you for being here, George. It's been
thank you for having me.
It's been incredibly fun. It's been very different this time. I think this has been a very different sort of podcast. But yeah, I mean, like, you know, like we're sort of saying, experimentation and plurality and multiplicity of ideas and systems is better than one straight arrow. Practice what you preach, right? So thanks,
I'm going to look forward to watching back over this when you upload it and just cringe. I'll be learning from my mistakes.
No, you're great, George. And thanks for being on. This has been wonderful. And thanks everyone for watching. If there was anything you'd like to see more of, anything you liked about this episode, please comment. And if you want to support the channel more, please subscribe, please like, please share it with anyone relevant. And yeah, you've been awesome for watching, sticking around for an hour, listening to us talk about incomprehensible nonsense, most likely. And please stay tuned with this channel to see more updates on the Libernet project and surrounding projects as a whole. So thanks everyone for watching, and thank you very much for being here, George. It's been very fun. Right. Cheers, everyone. Have a good start to next week. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.